Good morning. I'm Jeffrey Gross.
And I'm Valerie Stivers.
And we are Fretful Porpentine, the podcast. So I'm thinking, Valerie, that for our listeners who are just tuning in and didn't catch our last one, which was our first one, this being the only time we'll be able to say that, right? That we should say a little bit about what Fretful Porpentine, the podcast, is.
Fretful Porpentine, the podcast, is a podcast discussing music in literature. Usually classic literature, although today we're doing a new release, a debut novel by a writer who's written 2 previous memoirs and some other academic stuff. But in general, we discuss music in books.
That's it. So yes, as Valerie said, we normally talk about stuff that has been out for decades, maybe even a century or more. Today, we have something really meaty and juicy for you. A book published on July 22nd. It's a novel called Pan, like the Greek god, by Michael Clune. And spoiler alert, it's fantastic.
Yes, it is. And since the last time we recorded this podcast and then couldn't use what we had recorded.
dirty linen in public.
Since that time, I have reviewed this book for Compact Magazine, and I also went and saw Michael Clune interviewed by Christian Lorenzen at the Powerhouse Arena. So I have much more information than I did the first time about this book, which will be convenient for us, Jeffrey, don't you think?
Yes, I think so, Valerie, although I have to say I'm somewhat envious because I have exactly the same amount of information as I had, but I think it's more than enough.
Yes, well, since I am the book expert and you are the music expert, this doesn't matter.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, you've relegated me to my little cubicle.
Are you calling being a classical music expert a little cubicle?
No, it's an enormous open helix.
Well, actually, let's say this. What's better, books or classical music, Jeffrey? What do you think?
Yes. That's my answer.
You're dodging the question?
I am resolving it definitively.
Do you prefer listening to music or reading books?
Now, that's a trick question, and you know that.
I prefer reading books, but I do enjoy listening to music, and I'm learning about classical music here on our podcast. So although Jeffrey is denying the division of labor, we do have one, which is that I am...
You're the books expert.
I'm the books expert. You're the classical music expert, and classical music is... Would you say it's a cool and popular genre, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I would say that all the kids out there who have Riz are grooving to Beethoven. I would definitely say that. But
and this is the problem with the classical music expert, is that they are out of touch with reality and also the modern world. However, the point is that classical music is obviously fantastic and very interesting and not super accessible to people if they don't know how to listen to it or what they're listening for. Most casual music listeners will listen to a piece of classical music and sort of not know what to think and say, oh, that's pretty. However, if you know a little bit more about it, the experience really opens up. So one thing we're doing with this podcast is finding sort of narrative ways into it. And Jeffrey, it's been sort of a mission of yours to try to teach people about classical music, yes?
Well, it kind of is, yeah. And that's why I'm working on a book whose, function is exactly that, to demystify it, take away the sort of nonsense about how it's elitist and all that stuff, because it really isn't.
It's not elitist?
No, it's not elitist. Listen, if you want to...
Wasn't it only the elite who listened to music in the 1700s, or did everyone listen to music?
I'm not taking the bait, but I will tell you this.
I didn't even know that was bait, actually. If I've wandered into a classical music...
Donnybrook?
Showdown here?
Minefield?
It's unknown to me.
I will tell you this. I know somebody who made $14,000 speculating on Taylor Swift tickets. So who's the elitist, right? I mean, anyway, let's put that discussion aside. You're the book expert. Let's tell the people about the book.
Well, actually, we are, but let's also tell the people what piece of music we're going to be getting to here once we've finally gotten to it, which is, you tell them about this piece of music. What piece of music appears in Michael Clune's Pan?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting mix, actually. You have the Bach Orchestral Suites, of which the protagonist, Nick, that's his name, right? Nick.
Yes.
Nick listens to the first 3 of the 4 Bach Orchestral Suites, and he sort of doesn't get it until he does, until there's one that particularly sort of opens a door He doesn't use that phrase, but there's a lot about doors and opening and sort of losing yourself.
We're getting ahead. We're listening to the Bach Orchestral Suites. That is our what's upcoming for you classical music fanciers.
Right, and you classical music fanciers to be. So that includes everybody. And then there's two popular songs. One is More Than a Feeling, Boston, right?
Yes.
And the other is Everybody Plays the Fool by the Neville Brothers. Yes. Titans of popular music.
Okay, so let's tell the listeners a little bit about Pan.
Or a lot. Let's tell them a lot about Pan. Well, we loved it, but why do we love it? What is so amazing about it?
Well, this is a book that you don't know where it's going when you start reading it, is one of its many joys. It's about a teenage boy in high school in the Midwest. The time period was identified for me in the early 90s. And it sort of starts out as if he has panic attacks.
Right. Panic.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
So it's about a teenage boy who has panic attacks. At first, it almost seems like an ordinary high school novel, but even from the very beginning, things are strange. And they're strange in a way that you as the reader are not quite sure what's happening here or where you're going. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the very first pages because there's a motif of gates and doors and things opening that runs through the book. And there's one on the second page. The first line of this book is, "My mom kicked me out. My behavior was getting out of control," which is a great first line. And so he's kicked out, he's gone to live with his dad, and he's describing where his divorced father lives. Chariot Courts wasn't the worst in terms of low-grade housing, far from it. The builders had wrought a few charms against total exposure to time. The name, first of all, and there was a cast-iron gate, if you could call it that. It was an odd gate, perched on an island in the center of the subdivision's entrance. On the right you had the drive going in, and on the left you had the drive going out. In the center was this little grassy island, and in the middle was the gate, supported between two brick pillars. The pillars were maybe 4 feet high. The gate was maybe 3 feet wide. Real wrought iron. The bars bent into fantasies and curlicues of iron, and in the center, the swirls thickened into letters. Chariot Courts. The gate had a handle, but it never opened. I mean, you could walk around to the other side easy enough, but you couldn't go through the gate. Me and Ty tried to open it one time when we were drunk.
Yeah, so very interesting. Like in the very first line, he is, in a sense, being shown the door by his mother. That's clever.
I mean, he's being shown the door by his mother, and then we get this other very weird door gate thing.
I mean, it's just interesting because, and I hadn't thought of this before, but, we don't get a lot about the mom because he's not living with the mom. But
we get her in the second half of the book.
In the second half of the book, there's more. It's sort of like, so she, the mom, the mother's body is the door into the world, and then he is shown the door by mom. It's just, there's sort of concentric circles of signification there.
It is a book that's operating on a lot of levels. So I think one of the things that impressed Jeffrey and I the most about this book is that there's a absolutely unique thing that Michael Clune has done, and I think he's come up with it himself. This is a new thing in the way that he penetrates the sort of ordinary reality, the very mundane reality of our ordinary lives, with mystery and the sacred and the divine, because the function that Nick's panic attacks will come to have as the novel goes on is really to be exposing Nick to a kind of thinking that doesn't feel like realism, yet is perfectly real. I mean, nothing is happening in this book that's not absolutely explicable in sort of ordinary reality, yet obviously the word panic comes from the god Pan, and what is really happening here, or what he's wondering if is happening, is an encounter with the sacred, an encounter with the strange, an encounter with the wild, and these things are penetrated into the novel through these panic attacks. It's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, or even the sacred or the diabolical. It's kind of interesting that, he chooses a Greek god So he doesn't really have that sort of valence of like the Christian, sacred versus demonic. It's kind of
Right.
equivocal
Right.
in that
Right.
regard.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Very few contemporary novels being written today are this clever and this interesting in their thinking and in the way that their execution has borne out their clever ideas.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, to your point about the sort of multiple things going on. I mean, he hangs out with his friend Ty, who's kind of like he's a troublemaker, and they hang out with some other teens, and it's kind of weird, and I think we probably don't want to reveal too much of that. But so to a certain extent, it's just kind of a teenage thing, like a John Hughes movie. It's like, teenagers, they're so
Right.
crazy,
Right. Right.
that sort of thing. That's
Right.
one layer.
And then the other layer is this very philosophical and spiritual sort of meditation on reality and what reality really is. Because Michael Clune, and I learned this having gone to the talk, Michael Clune does not think that the sort of plain old reality that we're dealing with is actually the interesting or important reality. He is a believer in this form of existence here. And as a matter of fact, one of the doors or gateways into a more real and relevant, important reality is art and works of art.
Yeah, I mean it's so interesting. Clune doesn't think that the real reality is the reality, and yet on the other hand, if you look at Nick, the protagonist, and the ways in which he sort of transcends just ordinary common sense experience, they almost all seem fraught. None of them is like a sort of ecstatic vision or something like that. It's all like a feeling of myself, speaking of doors, is actually leaking out of my head in the act of looking. Yeah, it's really, there's an uncanny quality to it.
Right. It's if works of art and the panic attacks and these various other things are doors, what kind of place are they doors to? There's not an answer. I mean, this is not a book with a spiritual Christian. The doors are going to the wonderful world of heaven or God, and I think that's one of the reasons why the choice of Greek gods was so excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I used to study literature back in the late Bronze Age, I had a habit of thinking of texts as acting upon the reader. And so the word text takes in so many different kinds of things that it's almost misleading that it's one word, because different texts do very different things. And to bring that into the present, one of the things people talk about in literature nowadays is the decline of literary fiction, which either does or does not exist, depending on whom you talk to. Likewise, the decline of traditional publishing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to stake out a position on that, but I will say that living here in Brooklyn and sort of, you read about like Brooklyn books that are about Brooklyn and are by people who are living in Brooklyn and having a Brooklyn life. You read a lot of books that are sort of like, yeah, I'm in my 30s. I live in Brooklyn. My boss is an asshole. I'm on antidepressants. I have relationship problems. It's like diaristic, right? Like you're reading somebody's diary. This is very, very different from that because Clune is able to reach out and sort of grab the linguistic materials and get a sense for what they can do, so they act very powerfully on the reader. And this is something that I don't think you see very much nowadays. I think I'll repeat myself, a lot of writing is just diaristic.
Don't repeat yourself. It's a podcast. No.
I'm not allowed to repeat myself? I've used all these words before at least once.
Now you've distracted me from my point, which was that I think a lot of people writing these days are writing to say something that they want to say, and they're not writing to necessarily communicate something to somebody else. I mean, it's not a distinction that can be black or white, because obviously those things can shade into each other, but you're right that there's a sort of self-indulgent, diaristic feel to a lot of contemporary literary fiction, and this surely does not have it, although it's interesting because although it is fiction, his first he's written academic books, but he has 2 previous memoirs, and he said at the event that, in fact, this is basically a trilogy, and this book is also strongly autobiographical, except that when he started trying to tell the story, he didn't feel like he could exploit and bring out the themes well enough just purely with autobiography. So it's kind of a funny trilogy, 2 works of memoir and then 1 of fiction.
So this is the last of the trilogy.
This is the last of the trilogy. So in fact, it is autobiographical, but it doesn't feel that way. And it does achieve more than telling his personal tale. And like you said about the power of language is absolutely something he was trying to do. He believes that artwork works on people and can create new thoughts. I mean, I don't quite even know how to say what it can create, but it can create something else through your encounter with the artwork.
It makes you into someone else, in effect, while you're reading it.
Yes.
It colonizes your consciousness, so to speak. Is there something that's like really a passage that kind of brings that out?
Not that I can just jump into, but
Right.
I feel like we should talk about a piece of music because we've been talking about the book for a long time. So let's move on. We're going to get to Bach, but this is a book full of references to all kinds of writers and art and books and pieces of music and culture. One of the very funny ones is his use of the song More Than a Feeling.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, just to digress for a sec, well, it's not really a digression, but he references Shakespeare, I think. He references Baudelaire, for sure. He quotes an entire sonnet from Les Fleurs du Mal.
Mm-hmm. Oscar Wilde.
Oh, right. Oscar Wilde. Yes.
Ivanhoe.
Right. Ivanhoe plays a big role in there.
And then this wacky science fiction book called Nift the Lean.
Yes.
I
Nift
looked up the
Lean.
author of that just to see what the guy who wrote Nift the Lean looked like, and he looked exactly like the guy you would think would have written such a book.
A book called Nift the Lean.
Exactly.
It's not a chemical called niftalene. There's a guy called Nift, and he is the lean. That's all I got.
Yeah.
About Nift. Best avoid it.
Even as a science fiction junkie of this exact era, I had never heard of it.
I didn't know that. You were a science fiction jockey of that exact era?
Oh yes, as a young adult, as a teenager. I mean, I read all of these young adult classic sci-fi stuff.
I see.
Sci-fi fantasy. I guess Nift the Lean is fantasy.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, Lloyd Alexander.
Right. Lovecraft. Were you a Lovecraftian?
I was a little older in a little bit more of a pretentious way. You know, like it was one of those things that it was cool to like, so I liked it probably more than I actually liked it.
Yeah, I get
at that age.
Right. It's like carrying a hip tote bag or something like that.
Which we're going to get back to this because Clune is also using the works that he's referencing in a very unique and original way.
We should talk more about that.
We'll talk more about that. But first, let's talk about More Than a Feeling. Can we play any snippet of More Than a Feeling for our listeners, Jeffrey?
Yeah. Why don't we go over to the piano?
Okay.
And we will do that.
We don't have the rights to play the actual song, but Jeffrey will give us a little taste of More Than a Feeling on the piano.
But someday when our podcast is grown up and is big and mighty, we will get those rights.
I feel when our podcast is rich and bringing in the cash, we will buy the rights to More Than a Feeling.
Buy the rights. Everybody will have to come to us if they want to listen to that song. You want to hear it at 3 a.m. because you're feeling blue? Well, pay up. Anyway, so
I wonder how much that would cost.
Let us not speak of it. Anyway, so okay, we're going to go over to the piano. I'm not going to play through the whole thing and sing because that would just be kind of silly. Also, I regret to say that the Porpentine piano needs a good tuning, and pledge to our listeners, I will take care of that before the next episode, which is going to be about Tolstoy and Beethoven. But anyway, so I will talk a little bit about what makes this song tick. And I have a great feeling of solidity when I listen to this song. And one of the characters, the woman Sarah, I think her name is, says that she hears a door in this song. And I sort of hear that. Yeah, the guitar solo, like about halfway through. And yet, even though there's a door where you're looking up, the song itself is very kind of planted and solid. And why is that? Well, I'll tell you why it is. It's because most of the phrases in the song are in what we call conjunct motion. Okay, that means notes that are next to each other. So here's an example. That's conjunct. The opposite is disjunct motion, which would be like jumping, leaps, spaces between notes. So you have, for example, this is not a very good key for me, but I'll try to like sing it a little bit. We're in D. I woke up this morning and the sun was gone. I turned up the music to start my day. Now there was a little bit of a leap there. That's a leap. Those two notes are not adjoining, but it's a small leap. It's just a third, right? It's not. That's a big leap. Okay? So basically you have this, right? Notes are very close to each other, and that's what gives the song its overall, I think, quality of kind of, you might say immovability, but it's also strong because it doesn't just sit there. There's also a lot of amplification and that jangly guitar thing, as I said before. So you have start my day right this morning. So you have, and these two echo each other. So that gives the song a certain melodic coherence, kind of hangs together. I woke up this morning and the sun was so. You have the morning, and that is echoed by the, and the sun was gone. That note is really too low for me, but whatever. So there's a lot of this. And then at a certain point you have, I close my eyes. And it goes way up. That's the big leap. And that stands out because it's different from all the conjunct motion before. So it's a rather well put together melody. I close my eyes. Way up there, right? Anyway, that's about all I have to say about the song. It's a fun song. It's rather well constructed. And there you have it.
And now I'm going to read the passage from Pan that More Than a Feeling appears in. So this is our hero, Nick, has a crush on a girl named Sarah, and Nick is already having the panic attacks, so he's obviously a weird, and maybe not isolated isn't the right word, but he's a weird teenage boy who things may or may not go well when he goes over to a girl's house, but in fact they do go well, and this is a union created by agreement over the song More Than a Feeling. Okay, so here's the girl speaking, and she says, "My brother says that lots of people like Boston, but no one loves Boston." As an aside, she means the band, not the city. Sarah
although also the city, perhaps. Sorry. Pray continue.
As a person from Boston, I will not argue. Sarah looked at me solemnly. "I love Boston." "They're magic," I blurted out, leaning forward excitedly. The first time I heard More Than a Feeling, I stopped, becoming self-conscious. Sarah picked it up. "That song," she said, "it's not, like, solid." She closed her eyes, concentrating, shook her head in wonder. "The song has literally got a door in the middle of it. When the guitars go up, the whole song, like, opens in the middle. It's a door, right? In the middle of the song, like the door on a UFO, right?" "That's why you can never get tired of it," I interjected. "Because the door, like, goes up," she continued. "Every time that part comes around, the door slides up and there's this space, okay? It's like the inside of a UFO." They go on. Anyway, so they fall in love over More Than a Feeling. And just because we've got this iconic pop rock song here, Jeffrey, what do you think of the song?
Yeah, it's a great song in the sense of really fun to listen to.
Let's analyze this song as a music expert, and even as a classical music expert. I mean, as a classical music expert, you sort of listen differently than the ordinary person listens to a song.
I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm, I hate that word expert, but anyway, I don't know.
Fancier?
Amateur, which comes from the verb to love, as I said in the first episode. So, because that's what it's about.
And did you perhaps make this joke in a manuscript you're working on?
I may well have done that, yes, the manuscript that I'm working on about classical music. But at the end of the day, music is music, and what's so great about this song, why it's so just pleasant to the ears, is because it's just lots of major triads, which are always just, your ear just laps them up, so to speak. Also, it's got that jangly guitar sound, like, the Byrds cover of Mr. Tambourine Man, right? Dum dee 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 dee. It's just jangly guitars playing major chords. It just feels good.
Christian Lorenzen said that Nirvana stole some part of More Than a Feeling from Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh, yeah, I haven't heard that song in 80 million years, and I forget how it goes.
Okay, well, I think there's
that's interesting.
some part of More Than a Feeling is so catchy and so satisfying that it was also repurposed for Smells Like Teen Spirit. Back to my point about the classical music amateur fancier listening differently, what's a major triad? Because I don't know.
Well, so why don't we go over to the piano and talk about triads? So a triad. What is a triad? Well, this is a triad. It just happens to be open on my things, piece by Bach, right? So it goes like this. Stop. First two beats, right? We did this. That's a triad. That's a major triad.
That's 4 notes, isn't it? So why is it a triad?
Well, because this is the same note as this. See, same note. So the triad is basically, and that chord is really kind of the linchpin of classical music in what they call the standard repertoire, which is, roughly Baroque through early contemporary. So you would say like 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, up to about World War I-ish in that range. And why? Okay. So first of all, 3 notes, right?
So it's any 3 major notes following each other is a major triad?
No. You're in this key, right? The key of this note.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So this is what they call the root or the tonic, whatever. It's the note that it all gravitates to. And then we go up 1, 2, 3. So we have the third, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then we go up another third, 1, 2, 3, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have the root, the third, and the fifth, right? And that's your triad. Why? Because music is based on, or at least music in this 300-year window or whatever, but still continuingly, is based on the resolution of dissonance. So dissonance is tension, and then you have the resolution, and it feels good. It's could be like anything, like you're hungry and then you eat and that feels good. Or you need to take a deep breath and you take a deep breath and that feels good. So it's all about pleasure and desire, which is why in my book, the phrase, the erotics of music, figures largely.
Where does the dissonance come in this experience?
Well,
you started with the tonic and then the next thing we want, how do we know we want it?
Because we go something like this. Right? Dissonance, resolving to consonance. Or another example, here's another example. Suppose I do this. Very common progression. Piano's a little out of tune, right? Oh well. Suppose I do this. Instead of going where the goes very definitely to the, suppose I hold it and refuse to resolve it, right? Because I'm a tease. Suppose I do this. And you're like, for Christ's sake, resolve it. There we go. Okay. That is tension and release. And the release is typically, again, in the standard repertoire, but also in huge amounts of popular music, to a triad, to a major triad.
So this song, More Than a Feeling, that we're dealing with here, has all of these very satisfying major triads, which is a feeling. What it's giving us is not more than a feeling, but just a feeling. It's a good feeling.
And it is actually one of the most, I think, extraordinary aspects of human life, that sound waves, they're just vibrations coming through the air, can produce emotional, reactions of extraordinary depth sometimes.
Right. And interestingly to me, as a Catholic and a believer in natural law, we all respond emotionally the same way to sounds. It's not like you have a person who's like, ooh, the dissonance made me feel good. Or do you think some people would say that, but they're just being pretentious? What do you think?
No, I think, well, you've opened up a huge can of worms, a huge kettle of fish.
Again, accidentally. I don't know where I'm going here with these questions.
No, it's great. Yeah, same example, right? Okay, I'll go like. And I'm going to just walk away. I'm going to leave you hanging. I am not going to resolve this to this. You wouldn't do that. I mean, it's sort of, maybe you would in like a different kind of musical context, but
that's what I'm saying. Like our heartstrings vibrate on our ears, and that's just so weird, isn't it?
well, yeah.
Why should one sound have emotional content and another doesn't? But we're getting way off the track of Michael Clune and his book here.
I'm just really saying here, I mean, my purpose was to point out that major triads make you feel good. So here's another example. I don't really know how this goes, but I'll sort of fake it. Let's do a different key. What is that? That's No Woman, No Cry, right?
I'm totally not getting this song from what you're playing.
Those are the chords. Those are the underlying progression. It doesn't matter.
Don't recognize it.
Again, it illustrates why is No Woman, No Cry such a great and just like almost physically enjoyable song, because these chords, listen, I mean, they're just major triads.
I swear you're not really playing No Woman, No Cry.
That is No Woman, No Cry.
I don't
Those
recognize
are the
it.
underlying chords. Anyway, I'm just making the point about major triads. So.
Point made. Okay, so that was More Than a Feeling, and at the event that I went to, Michael Clune said that he had not actually loved this song as a teenager, which is funny because I totally did love that song as a teenager. This is another interesting thing about this book, is that it centers around a group of kids who all get fucked up together, basically. And when you're a teenager, you have an intensely romantic feeling about that kind of friend group, basically. Like that it feels like real life, and it feels like you're sort of escaping into adulthood, and there's always this feeling that anything could happen on these druggy, fucked up, teenage hangout nights, which is another kind of door, although it's not really a door into a real place in my now adult opinion. I mean, that's sort of a door into drug abuse and problems, but it is a really fundamental teenage experience, and it's interesting. So it's a rarity to encounter it with quite that sort of purity of what it really felt like in a novel, but I think he's succeeded at that. In that era of my life, we listened to More Than a Feeling. In that era of Clune's life, he did not.
But so this next anthem, it's like an anthem of the book, right? It has rich symbolic value.
Right. So the next anthem of the book is sort of an opposite of More Than a Feeling. It is a song that...
Less Than a Feeling. This is Less Than a Feeling.
This is a song, the plot as it's going on here has Nick battling his panic attacks and trying to find ways to not panic. And he's always afraid that he's going to fall out of his eyes and face, basically. He's afraid that he's going to actually lose himself and enter this scary and wild pan world. And he's always trying to combat the attacks and not have that happen to him. He starts working at Ace Hardware, and unfortunately for him, Ace Hardware is exactly the kind of place that might bring on a panic attack.
And so much more, or less.
So I'm going to describe a little bit, to lead into this song, I'm going to read a little bit about working at Ace Hardware.
This is great. I love this part.
The store manager, Keith, would probably view the description of my activity at Ace as work with skepticism. In fact, my energies were almost entirely devoted to avoiding work. But this itself was a job at least as demanding as any of the spirit-killing mundane tasks Keith assigned me. I was in constant motion. When you're trying to avoid work, the worst thing you can do is to stay in the same place. It's impossible to conceal the 3 stigmata of idleness while stationary. The 3 stigmata of idleness. Yeah. The hanging hands, the half-open mouth, the unfocused eyes. I moved rapidly in circuits through the store with quick, purposeful strides, calculated to render me invisible. Everybody Plays the Fool by the Neville Brothers came through the speakers. The store had a loop of 5 songs. Corporate had figured out the maximum average time customers spent in the store and bought the rights to exactly that many songs. Everybody Plays the Fool was unquestionably the worst. The chorus features a whimsical, flute-like 8-note synthesizer hook. This was perhaps the 14th time I'd heard Everybody Plays the Fool that day. When I started working at Ace after school in the spring, I'd only heard it about 12 times per day, 3 days per week. But since classes had let out, I'd heard it approximately 32 times per day, 5 days a week.
That's just such a wonderful passage. I mean, it's full of like little touches. Like he doesn't say the average time; he says the maximum average time, which is almost like contradictory, right?
Right.
You know that a customer will stay, and the wonderful thing about he's moving through the store purposefully, but his purpose is not to have a purpose.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
it's just
his purpose is to not be assigned any work.
And then of course the stigmata thing, which you picked out.
The three stigmata of idleness is just. I mean,
the open mouth. It's just so great.
The combination of this book being wildly funny and it being a YA novel and it being sort of a serious metaphysical and literary critical novel is just mind-blowing.
And in that last category being kind of terrifying by turns.
Right. And actually, I tend to discount this when I'm discussing the book because I'm not an anxious person and I have never had panic attacks, but for Michael Clune, this was his real life growing up, and in discussing the book with other people, the kind of person who tends to have this kind of mental issue is much more interested in this as a meditation on mental illness and panic, and that is real in here. But Clune describes people as having either, I guess, solid mind or not solid mind. And
yes.
Solid mind is the kind of mind that cannot be drawn off into these fancies, and I think I have solid mind.
Ah, that's good. I'm not sure what kind of mind I have, if and where applicable. Void where prohibited by law. Right. So we're going to talk about the wonderful Everybody Plays the Fool.
Right. And Jeffrey, as a music expert, what do you think of this song?
See my thumb pointing down? That's what I think of it. It's a lousy song. It's mediocre. I mean, but it's kind of offensively mediocre. I would say, I'm going to just sort of flight of fancy here, that we could have kind of a taxonomy of mediocrity. Okay. I happen to like, and I am mildly ashamed, but I kind of like some songs by Billy Joel.
Yeah.
They're mediocre, but they're fun.
I don't know if you can say Billy Joel songs are mediocre.
I think you kind of can, but they're fun mediocre, right? Whereas this thing, let's stick to our knitting here. This song, Everybody Plays the Fool, is just kind of a dumb song. And what's offensive about the way it's dumb is it actually is trying to take on, from the get-go, like some serious themes. Like he says, the singer comes in, he says, so your heart's been broken and you're maybe even thinking about dying. Well, before you do something rash. So he's actually right from, the first few bars talking about suicide, right? And yet the song is just so, Clune is right. It's got that sort of boppy synthesizer thing, right? Do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do. But what's even worse than that is that the title is wrong. How can you presume to talk seriously about heartbreak and suicide and you don't even know what play the fool means? To play the fool is to make jokes, right? To make yourself appear like a fool to get people to laugh, right?
Yes.
If you walk down the street and then, classic pratfall, you slip on a banana peel, like if you really didn't see it, you're not playing the fool, right? You are being made a fool of by life. It's not the same. It's like, guys, get the title right.
Right. Grammatically incorrect title. And again, we can't actually play this song for you on our podcast, but
because we're not Ace and we haven't bought the rights.
We're not Ace.
And we're not gonna.
I may have solid mind, but I am not in the direction of Ace, which is another thing that we're not going to get into. But when you hear the song, it's just absolutely hilarious that the poor guy has to hear this song 14 times a day. I mean, it's so funny.
Is there anything else about it that's...
No, bad song. Bad song. Moving on to Bach.
Yes.
The opposite, the most extreme and dramatic opposite of a bad song we could probably get.
This is not in the direction of Ace. You should say a little something about what he means, because it's so funny. What does he mean by towards Ace?
He had tamped the panic attacks down for a while, and then when he starts working at Ace, they start coming back, and he's desperately trying to find other sort of activities and charms to ward them off. And anything in the direction of Ace, which is meaningful. Anything in the direction of Ace is leading him towards panic, and he's looking for things to keep him away from it.
Yes. So let's talk about Bach. So Bach wrote 4 orchestral suites, and they're for most of them, pretty big orchestra by the standards of Bach's time. He wrote them really in the middle, smack dab in the middle of his career. He lived from 1685 to 1750. He wrote them, it is thought, between about 1725 and 1730, when he was already in Leipzig, where he would spend the last couple decades of his life as a dutiful servant of Mother Church. And they're fucking great. They're just wonderful pieces. Three of them are in major. One thing we didn't talk about when we talked about triads was minor, which is sort of the opposite of major. It's a gross oversimplification, but a major triad is basically happy. It goes like bum, bum, bum. And a minor triad is basically sad. It goes bum, bum, bum. Anyway, what should we say about them?
Well, okay, so first we should say...
How do they figure in the book, maybe,
right.
is
well,
kind of...
I'm going to say how they figure in the book, but I'm going to say something about how Clune is using works of art, because it was my impression when I was reading this book the first time that he was approaching these works of art in a very naive and creative kind of way. Nick, the narrator, is bringing his own thoughts and feelings and experiences to the work. He's not yet necessarily interpreting the work in a sense that you would for academic literary interpretation. And Clune actually said in the talk that I attended that that was exactly his purpose, and that it's kind of encountering the work raw, the way that he did when he read things as a teenager. His usage of the Bach Orchestral Suites and the way he's listening to them and what he's making of them are not necessarily educated or the usual interpretations. It's a naive appropriation of the Bach Orchestral Suites. So that's interesting, but I will read how he encounters them in the book now. And actually this mentions the ace being a direction part. So he says, in the same way, ace was a direction. More vibrancy, more color, more boldness, more intensity. This was the direction of the store, with its bouncy music, its garish colors, its tools like animal bodies, like body traps, its inescapable shadowless lighting. Pointed, that's the direction Ace pointed. The deathly spiritual threat I longed to escape through sensory intensities was in fact inexorably carried forward on a tide of louder sounds, sharper colors, more intense sensations. The true escape, I realized, he's music shopping as he's thinking about this. The true escape, I realized, shopping suddenly in the colorless desert of the classical music section, was not a tear or a rip in the Ace substance, but a small, unobtrusive fold. So I picked out the least interesting looking CD I could find, a CD that had no image at all on its plain red cover, just words. J.S. Bach, Orchestral Suites, Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, Neville Mariner.
Yes, just an unobtrusive fold. In reality, that's all we are, classical music people. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bearing the least interesting looking CDs that a teenage boy has ever seen.
The least, yes. God.
So, and then he has an ecstatic experience listening to this music. You've told us about Orchestral Suites. Tell us about Neville Mariner.
Yeah, so Neville Mariner, who died in 2016.
And he's the conductor of this particular recording. Yeah?
He conducts the orchestra, wonderfully named Orchestra of St. Martin in the Fields. I don't know how many St. Martins they have in Britain, but this one's...
So many,
They must have many.
They must have many.
They must have a St. Martin
St.
on
Martin
the
of the Marsh.
Or of the Marsh, right? Or St. Martin Super Mare or something like that. Like Weston Super Mare.
I don't even know what Super Mare means.
It means above the sea, I think, right? Super Mare.
In Latin?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's Latin.
It's Latin.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't heard, I have a few recordings of Sir Neville, and my impression is that it's a little tiny bit on the side of like sort of light, L-I-T-E, light classics, that kind of thing. That, you wouldn't go to him for like Beethoven's Ninth. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I think he occupies sort of...
And what years was Neville Mariner a important British conductor?
Well, decades, really. He lived a long time. And, again, he just died like 9 years ago. So he had an extraordinary career, was much beloved. I think he's one of those people who just, like, everybody loved him. I may be wrong. Classical music is actually kind of a catty world behind the scenes.
Well, but when was this recording made? The recording that Clune was listening to?
Oh, geez. When did he record the Orchestral Suites? Well, I would bet that he probably recorded the Orchestral Suites more than once. That would be my bet. So I don't know exactly when this recording was made.
Somebody didn't do his pre-podcast homework.
Now.
Okay, let's move on to safer ground.
We had a rule about that.
what is an orchestral suite? What is a suite?
Well, what's a suite?
What's
Really,
a
the
suite,
question
I
is,
guess?
what's a suite?
Well, wait. Are there suites that aren't for an orchestra?
Yes, Valerie, I'm glad you asked me that because I'm about to tell you that there are keyboard suites, there are orchestral suites, could be suites for a chamber ensemble, like a small group of like 2 to 9 musicians. A suite is kind of a concept of something that's kind of loosely put together. It's sort of loosely and informally organized, and it's just a bunch of things, in this case dances, that follow each other in a pleasing fashion. So you'll have contrast, right? You'll have a fast thing and then you'll have a slow thing. You'll have a lyrical thing and then you'll have something that's all like trumpets and drums. These would be ways of changing it up. Mm-hmm. And variety being one of the key sort of artistic organizing principles, right? Unity out of variety, right? Or variety within unity, if you prefer. Now, this is as opposed to something like a symphony where there's a stricter structure. Like in the symphony, you would typically have an opening movement that would almost always be in what's called sonata form, and then you would have a slow movement, and then you would have, as we discussed in our last podcast, which was our first, you would have a minuet or a scherzo, and then you would have a finale, which is probably a rondo. There's something a little bit tighter and kind of more deterministic about that.
So that's a symphony, and
right.
Then a suite. So a suite is made up of what kind of parts?
So you've got dances. You've got a lot of dances. There are dances that occur in almost all suites, and then there are kind of optional dances, and they're all like in the case of the orchestral suites, they're in the French style, what was called the French Baroque style, which means you would have dances like the bourrée, the gavotte, the passe-pied, the minuet, and on and on and on. There were a lot of different kinds of dances.
And wait, did we say when did Bach compose these orchestral suites?
We did say that.
Oh,
we
sorry,
said that was like 1725 to 1730.
Okay, so 1700s they were composed, and then this is being recorded in the 1980s or around there, we're not sure. And what dances are in these particular orchestral suites, or does it not matter?
Well, I mean, it does matter in a sense, but on the other hand, French Baroque dance is pretty arcane. Not a lot of people, myself included, really know that much about it. But one thing that's interesting...
So if I said, what does a gavotte sound like, you wouldn't be able to hum a gavotte, or would you?
Well, a gavotte is in duple time, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, as opposed to a minuet, which is in triple time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's a kind of, but there's slow 2 and fast 2. But the overarching point, I think, is that these are stylized dances. I don't think that these were really intended for people to actually dance to. Okay, it's a stylized, type that was part of the consciousness of the time. And there's a whole interesting question, which I can't really answer, but I want to bring it up as a question. Sort of, what did the Germans think of the French? Because these are all in the French style.
Oh, funny.
Right, well, yes, because in fact, and I don't know if this was...
The Germans can't have thought well of the French. Bach could not have thought well of the French as sort of fire and brimstone Lutheran.
Yeah, well, and yet, you have these pieces, which are in that style. And in fact, there's a keyboard suite by Bach called the French Overture, and which is all in this, style. It's just interesting because at least in modern German, I don't know if they said this back then, but if you're living really well, like you're enjoying life, right? They say you live wie Gott in Frankreich. You're living like God in France, which is just wonderful. So I don't know if back then it was thought of in that fashion. But anyway.
Very, very, very funny. Okay, so what dances do we have in our particular orchestral suites that we're about to listen to?
Well, so for example, in the third suite, we have an overture, and you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I thought the whole thing was called an overture, right? They're the 4 orchestral suites or overtures. Yes, that's true. It's a problem of terminology.
A suite can also be an overture, and it's the same thing?
Yeah, that's what they're called. That's what they were
okay.
called. See, it says Ouverturen, and then it says suites. It's the same thing, but it's confusing. This is one of the things that puts people off of classical music sometimes, and it makes me sad because it's really just like nomenclature. And then after a while, once you know it, it doesn't get in your way at all. Like, for example, let's take baseball. Okay, I find a little intimidating terminology like I think it's called the infield fly rule.
I don't know baseball rules.
It's a thing, and I don't understand what it is. And so that intimidates me a little bit. But it's kind of like once you know it, you know it. So Anyway, so we have the overture, which is a big sprawling movement.
But the overture, this is the first track.
The first track
of the suite is an overture.
Yes.
And this is confused by the fact that the suites can be called overtures overall, but just forget about that. So we have an overture here, first track, and then what?
Then then we have the famous air, which is the second movement of the third suite, which Clune makes a big deal out of, rightly so. And then you have two gavottes, and then you have a bourrée, and then you have a gigue, which is a fast, like a jig, right? It's the same word, okay?
And I think you've said that some of these pieces of music are some of Bach's most successful and beloved?
Yeah, that's true. They're really wonderful pieces. They're very exuberant. They manage to be, sort of courtly and yet at the same time dancey.
Okay, so here is the experience of Nick, Clune's hero, listening to the Bach Orchestral Suites for the first time. And, once again, the themes here are that these artworks provide sort of portals into a different reality in some way, and he's also making an idiosyncratic and very personal usage of them. So he says, "When the music started, it was like an architecture inside a color. The color was red. The cover had given me that hint. But within it were lines and circles, the bones of the color. This is extremely high-level music, I thought. I didn't understand any of it. But it didn't matter. I had the feeling that my listening was like the sketch of a god's eye, that I was picking up the bits and pieces of a sensation that required a greater body and mind than my own to cohere. I listened very, very closely. I felt I possessed, in the unfolding complexities of the music, the materials of a higher intelligence's perspective on the world, on afternoon light, for example. I felt intensely grateful that I owned the CD. I could listen to it as often as necessary. Undoubtedly, it would take many hundreds of listenings, many hours of study, but it contained everything I needed. When the first track ended, I considered starting it over. I should get this one down before moving on, I thought. But the next track had already started, and the rods and cones of the god's eye swam in the key's thick liquid. C major, as I would learn. The first suite went on like that. It wasn't an experience, but the raw materials of a greater experience than I was currently capable of. Even at that distance, at that level of incomprehension, it opened an entirely different dimension from Ace. The second suite, too, hovered just out of focus, a blur of movement, like I was an ant crawling over a speaking human's lips. I didn't understand, but I was learning. The first movement of the third suite, the sounds possessed the same hieroglyphic quality, the sensations of unknown meaning vibrated in the notes. But with the first slow tone of the second movement of the third suite, I felt it. Okay, so here we are, the second movement of the third suite. And can you tell us a little bit about that, Jeffrey?
This is a piece that's very famous. It's one of Bach's, I think, most famous pieces. And it's one of those pieces, this is always a sign of great renown, is if a piece can sort of capture the popular imagination and sort of swim through the membrane between classical and popular music, meaning that there are arrangements, settings to words. Debussy has a couple pieces like that. And Chopin, where people, put words on them. Sometimes not to the advantage of the piece, but never mind that. The air it's called an air, which really just means song, right? It's just called song.
Not a dance, a song.
It is not a dance. It is not a dance.
Idiosyncrasy.
Yes. The air is in a very common form called binary form. And when I say common, I mean binary form was widespread during the Renaissance and Baroque periods. So when you understand binary form, then you have a big leg up in terms of understanding a lot of pieces from that time. And it's an interesting example of the fact that in classical music, there are many paradigms, let's say many forms and so on, or techniques that are very simple, and yet in the hands of a great composer lead down some very deep paths. Binary form, as the name implies, it's a piece that's in two halves. It's really that simple, two halves, which we will call A and B. Usually both halves are repeated, so you'll have A and then A again, B and then B again. And that will be that particular movement. And most of the movements of the Bach Orchestral Suites, and for that matter, the Bach Keyboard Suites, are in binary form. How does binary form actually work? What makes it effective musically? Two things. One, that you start in the main key of the piece, but then you leave that key, and that creates harmonic tension. And then at the end of the piece, you return to the main key, so you have release, tension and release. The other thing is that the second half is almost always more complex, a little bit more dense than the first half. And that gives you a sense of development and, again, of intensification. So you have the sort of initial presentation of the piece's ideas in A, and then there's a certain amount of, kind of intensifying and working out and building of tension in B, which, as you'll hear, is a bit more elaborate. So you have continuity, but there's also sort of an arc. So here's A. And now we'll listen to B.
Okay, so obviously very, very beautiful. Should I read what Clune thought during this piece of music, or should we discuss how we felt and thought?
Why don't you start with the Clune, actually? Yeah.
Okay. So this is how Nick describes hearing what we just heard, which was the second movement of the third suite. And a scene appeared behind my eyes, not like a dream image, more like a daydream, unfurling without any effort, pure responsiveness to the music. A Roman scene, Salome atmosphere. A large hall, marble columns lining each side. Figures, resplendent in richly colored togas, purple and red and gold, lay on cushions spread on the mosaic floor. Lay in the same posture as I, stretched in reality upon my narrow bed. At the far end, the hall opened on a sunset scene, the sea lapping gently at the foot of a flight of marble stairs. Sensation of vastness. The red distance of sunset slowly filling the vast chamber. So definitely not what Bach intended with this piece.
No.
Definitely not.
Yeah, although interesting that he mentions the color red. The color red is an important motif. Like he talks about the signet edition of Ivanhoe. And
Which
if you
is
Google
red.
it, which is red. You Google it. So let's talk a little bit about Bach's intentions. People talk about how Bach's music had two aspects, right? There was sacred music and secular music. This would be obviously secular with, dances, courtly dances, all that stuff. But that's not really accurate. At the bottom of the autographs of a lot of Bach's secular music, you find the letters SDG, which stands for Soli Deo Gloria, to God alone be glory. And then sometimes you will find the initials JJ, which stands for Jesu Juva, Jesus help. I guess, asking for help with the composition process. So it was all for the glory of God from Bach's standpoint.
Right.
There was music that was liturgical and there was music that was non-liturgical like this, but there was no music that was not sacred from Bach's standpoint.
Right. So no Roman scenes with a Salome atmosphere were going through his mind when he composed this music.
We have no idea really what was going through Bach's mind. And in fact, actually, I can't resist.
He was thinking about the Lord. You know that.
Well, yes. Yes, that's a very high level, though. That doesn't say why he used a D rather than a B in this particular bar. But so Stravinsky was a very critical guy. He said that Bach and Mozart were the two perfect composers. And he said, I have no way of understanding how they did what they did. This is from the diaries of his protege, Robert Kraft. I think it's probably authentic. So, yeah, interesting. So what did we feel?
Well, I'm predisposed to find it to be very kind of sad and, I never pronounce this word correctly, elegiac. I mean, it did feel, I keep thinking it's underneath the sea, which he doesn't say it's underneath the sea. I'm imagining this Roman scene actually deep beneath the sea for some reason. And
like in an octopus's garden, for example?
No, you're not making classical music look good.
Doing my best.
To me, this is one of these sort of classic experiences where you're like, that was very pretty, but I don't really know what to make of it.
Yeah. I think this reminds me, actually, I didn't expect to be reminded of this quotation that I've only known for a couple of weeks, but apparently Bob Dylan was once asked by somebody, what did this song that you just played, what did it mean? And Bob Dylan said, did you hear the song? And the person said, well, yeah. And Bob Dylan said, that's what it meant. It's kind of like the sounds, that's what it means. And it's interesting to me that you picked out the sadness in it because it is, again, it's in a major key. And yet I think you're right. There is that undertone of melancholy, sort of both. It sort of transcends. That's what's so great about it. I think there's almost like a sort of a sacred vantage point from which our trivial worldly joys and sorrows are all seen and understood and forgiven and so on.
Right. I mean, and that's what I really associate with Bach is this sense of no matter what's going on, he's always has his eye on eternity and always is aware of the futility and foolishness of most human endeavor.
That is true. And that actually is a great opening for me to talk a little bit about the trumpet call in the first orchestral suite. But so the idea is that there is a kind of theological commentary that goes on in some of Bach's quote unquote secular works. And in this particular, this is the first of the orchestral suites. So Nick would have heard this piece.
Yes.
This was the first thing, right?
Yes.
He popped the CD in.
So in the first orchestral suite, yes, he listened to that one.
So there's this little passage where you have a motif. There's a gavotte. I think it's a gavotte. And, you can just imagine the aristocrats in their finery and their powdered wigs, and they're swirling around, and they're looking at each other, and they're flirting, and the whole sort of worldly pageantry. Mm-hmm. And then there's this motif that goes bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. And it just is a major triad. Again, da, 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 bum, 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 up, and then down. But then when it goes bum, 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 it starts to sound kind of militaristic and even a little bit threatening. And it's supposed to because it's a motif that comes out of another Baroque composer's work where it was referred to as the Kriegstrompete, the war trumpet.
Kriegstrompete?
Yeah, the Kriegstrompete. And what war trumpet is this? Well, this is the trumpet this is the last trump. This is the trumpet from the Book of Revelations, which is a really...
Wait, did you just make a Trump and Revelation connection? Wow.
Don't even go there. We're not...
Okay, Back up. Forget that.
Cutting room floor for that one. Anyway, the Book of Revelations is very strange. There are 7 seals and 7 trumpets, and 7 plays a big role, in short. But at a certain point...
War trumpet.
Yeah, the war trumpet. At a certain point, Christ comes in on a white horse, and everything is dissolved, the entire worldly pageantry. There's a line in the Requiem Mass text, that goes, "This day of wrath will dissolve the world in ashes." So everything will be burnt to a cinder, and then the quick and the dead will be judged, and yada yada. So the idea is...
So that was Bach's reference with this series of sounds in the first Orchestral Suite?
Yes, smuggled into this lovely Gavotte is this message, which is sort of Bach saying, you guys can have a great time, you can laugh, dance, flirt, whatever, but this is all nothing. This is all just dust. It's all just foam, and it will be blown away into smithereens.
I don't know if this is Michael Clune's intention or not, but that actually gives me chills considering the structure of this book. I mean, the structure of this book is very much about such things.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just, and if you don't know that, and kudos to my friend from grad school, Michael Morisson, the Bach scholar, who pointed this out to me. But he wrote a whole book about these sort of theological tropes as they appear in the music of Bach. And it's very multi-layered, in short.
There was something about how different conductors handle this material.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't sort of play all the stuff that's, copyrighted, understandably. But some conductors, they get to that passage, and it seems, I don't know what was going on in their minds, but it seems as though they're just like, that's kind of weird. I'll just sort of ignore it. And they sort of bury it. And there are other conductors who...
So to be clear, this is the sound of the war trumpet and Christ riding in on the white horse, and it's a particular series of notes, and some conductors, you just kind of don't even notice it because it gets...
It seems that way.
Right.
It gets lost in the texture.
Lost in the music.
Yeah, because there's a lot of other stuff going on at the same time. But other conductors are like, hey, this is... I don't know if they know the theology. There's no reason that they should. A conductor is like a working stiff, basically. He's got concerts to conduct. But they bring it out. And then it's kind of dramatic. And even if you don't know it, as I didn't before it was explained to me, you hear that and you're like, wow, that's kind of weird.
Right. And I find this actually disturbing element in a lot of Bach, not so much in the air that we heard from the third suite, but a lot of times there's a ominous undertone going on in things, a reminder that there's more to all of this than there seems. And one thing that we discovered, I think, is that the Neville Mariner recording that Clune was listening to does play the war trumpet. That particular recording is good about that and emphasizes these sounds.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I also think that you not hearing those undertones in the air is absolutely also correct, because the air is intended to be really sort of balm for the soul.
Yeah, no, it wasn't in the air.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Pretty good.
Well, I would like to just say a couple more things about the novel. First of all, I want to reiterate, and I think we both agree, buy this book. It's a great book. And when I say it's a great book, I'm not just speaking colloquially. It has marks of genius in it. And I don't use that word lightly at all. I want to speculate a little more about, and I can do this without any spoilers, about what kind of book it is, and what's the genre. And there's a temptation when you first start reading it, and there's all this weird stuff about how my thoughts coming out of my eyes and just all of that, the slipperiness of selfhood. You think, oh, well, this might be magical realism. And it's very definitely not magical realism, because we don't experience Clune's world as being a magical world that's kind of out there somewhere that we can contemplate with enjoyment. Typically, magical realism, it's kind of like there's an old lady and she has a tree growing out of her back, or there's like a little boy and he can turn potatoes into frogs. And even if the frogs bring the plague, it's okay for you as the reader because it's happening in a different world.
You know what's actually very interesting about this observation is that I didn't realize this, but Clune said that one of his strongest influences is Gogol. And Gogol certainly is, I mean, magical realism now also is kind of a slur almost on a style that is out of fashion and people don't care about anymore. But Gogol was another one of these writers that really did bring in devils, and it was dead souls, and that was actually for real, the buying of the souls in some way. So the devil walked in Gogol stories in a very real way.
Yes.
And it also, Gogol has this kind of weird folkloric element a little bit too. So very interesting.
And that brings me to then, well, that's good, because that brings me to, I think there's a line that you can draw between Gogol and Kafka. And I think that the Kafka influence here is sort of the refutation of the magical realism, because when you read Kafka, I think you're conscious of a world that is coterminous with our world. Like a guy just wakes up and he's been transformed into a cockroach. And you don't experience that as magical realism. Like, oh, hey, that's cool. Maybe next time you'll be transformed into like a fuzzy sheep or a flock of geese or something like that. No, this is our world, but it's given back to us in a way that is alienating and even terrifying. A father sentencing his son to death by drowning. The penal colony, where you have the horrible machine that inscribes the sentence on the back of the convict. It's just...
Yes. And one of my favorite things about that particular story is that, because, you know, I do the cooking from literature thing, there's food in it. The machine, while you're being slowly and tortuously executed by your sentence being carved into your flesh, it has a little like dish where you can lap up some gruel with your tongue.
That detail is what really just, that's like the knife between the ribs.
It really is.
You know, because, so anyway, Clune's world, I mean, it's not horrible to that degree, but there is a sense that this is our world, and he takes things that are very familiar to us. And I have to quote one of my favorite sentences where he says something was a relaxing way to look. So you first read that sentence and you think, oh, he's talking about somebody's outfit, like he looks chill in those clothes. That's not what he means. Yeah. No, he means like a way of using your eyes to look. But there is no way to look. You just look. When your eyes are open, as mine are now, you're just looking. It's not an extra thing. So he takes this thing that we do literally, 18 hours a day, and gives it back to us as something that is...
estranged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like the Emily Dickinson thing, tell the truth, but tell it slant, right? It's like, it reminds me of that a little bit. I'd like to think that we've conveyed to our listeners what a wonderful book this is.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say. It was bringing it back to the usage of the Greek divine, basically, because there's a tension in this book about what these alternate states are. Some of them seem terrible, and then some of them seem like a way to combat the terror. So the Bach Orchestral Suite, in one sense, it is bringing you somewhere else, but it's not bringing you somewhere terrible. And the kind of admixture of glory and beauty and terror is not Christian. It is ancient, and the Greek gods were neither good nor bad in some ways. It could be terrifying or it could be wonderful, sublime. And you don't know which door you're going through when you open a door here.
Right. It's like Monty Hall. Is there a goat or... Well, no, because actually the word tragedy is thought to maybe be etymologically related to the word for goat. It has something to do with sacrifice or something like that.
Wow. All right. We are sacrificing goats here on the Fretful Porpentine podcast.
Yes.
Until next time.
And thank you all for being here and being friends of the Porpentine. And Pan by Michael Clune.